He died in a tuxedo under a broken clock, holding a folded sheet of music no one had ever heard. No blood, no ID, just silence. But when I played the cassette he left behind, I heard his voice, and the truth he buried beneath 40 years of guilt and one final note. The call came in just after 5 a.m., but I was already awake. Hadn't really slept. Just drifted in and out of a half-dream, the kind where the city keeps talking to you even with your eyes closed. When dispatch said unresponsive mail, South Street Ferry Terminal, I didn't ask for more. That part of the waterfront doesn't do accidents. It does endings. The sun wasn't up yet, but the river was already moving, restless as always. I pulled up to the old terminal just as the first streaks of gray cracked across the sky. The place had been boarded up since before the last mayor took office. Rats lived there. Kids tagged the walls. Nothing useful happened past midnight. So when I saw the man, propped up against a rusted bench like he'd sat down for a view that never came, I knew this wasn't just another ghost. He was dressed like a memory. Black tuxedo, bow tie perfectly tied, shoes polished so sharp they caught what little light the morning had to offer. Looked like he was waiting for a cab that never came. Looked like he never got the message the world had moved on without him. No blood, no visible wounds, no slump or fall. Just stillness. Like the wind had whispered something final, and he listened too closely. I knelt beside him. His skin was cool, not cold. Eyes closed, not clenched. There was no fear on his face, just absence. Peace, maybe, or something trying to pass for it. I checked his pockets. Nothing. No wallet, no ID, not even a coin. But tucked inside the inner lining of his jacket was a folded sheet of paper, thick and soft, the kind old sheet music used to be printed on. I opened it carefully. Just one line printed at the top in faded ink. For the one who waited. That was it. No notes, no bars, no melody, just the title. A uniform approached behind me, too young to know how to look at death without flinching. He said there were no witnesses, no cameras, just a city that didn't stop long enough to notice a man slipping away in formal wear. I told him to clear the scene. Let the ME take their time. Told him this wasn't one we could write off as a cold night and a tired heart. Because whoever he was, he didn't come here to die. He came to be found. And in a city that forgets you faster than it ever knew you, that kind of decision means something. A tuxedo, a river, a note with no music. Someone had waited for him once, long enough for him to try and answer, even if it was too late. I didn't know who he was, but I knew what this was. It was a beginning, wrapped in silence, pressed in black, and waiting to be played. He hadn't fallen, that much was clear. Dead weight doesn't land like that. Doesn't lean neatly against a bench like it just got tired of standing. There's a difference between collapse and placement, and if you've seen enough of both, your eyes stop needing confirmation. He was placed, hands on him after death or just before. Someone had made sure he looked intentional. The coroner crouched beside him while I stood back and watched the river shift like it was trying to wash the whole scene clean. She took his pulse even though we both knew she wouldn't find one. Habit maybe, or respect. There was no rigor yet, no swelling. The time of death lined up with sunrise or just before. That made it recent. That made it close. No trauma, no blood, no broken bones. I asked her to check under the collar. No bruising, no ligature marks. I've seen clean deaths before. Overdoses, strokes, the kind that catch people sitting. But this wasn't one of them. This had symmetry. Design. He'd been laid here the way you'd lay down a suit for someone who never got to wear one. The pathologist started talking about possible toxins. CO2 maybe, if he'd been killed in a garage then brought here. Or barbiturates, if someone wanted him to drift instead of scream. But I wasn't listening to theories. I was watching the ground. No drag marks, no shuffle of feet. The dust on the floor hadn't been disturbed. The bench had flakes of old paint curling up like dried skin, but none were knocked off around him. Whoever brought him here had lifted him, carried him, and done it carefully. Which meant it wasn't random, it was personal. I circled him slowly, looked at the way his cuffs were tucked, the line of the collar. Every detail whispered a message, if not a motive. He wasn't just left, he was presented. The folded sheet of music in his jacket said as much. Whoever gave him that note wanted it found, wanted it seen. The title alone, For the One Who Waited, sounded like a promise that had missed its mark, or a regret finally trying to be heard. The ME said she'd need labs, maybe a tox panel. I told her to take her time. I already knew this wasn't a mugging, wasn't suicide. It was too clean, too still, too deliberate. He reminded me of Henry Marsh. Different man, same silence, same careful hands arranging the scene, same weight of something unfinished. This man wasn't discarded, he was surrendered. And there's a kind of violence in that too, the kind that doesn't bleed but leaves echoes behind. Quiet ones, long ones. I stood there, breathing it in. Not a murder, not yet. But whatever it was, it started with the kind of love that never learns how to leave. It was the kind of detail that didn't belong on a corpse. A watch that nice doesn't usually die with its owner. It gets stolen first. Pawned, stripped, forgotten in a drawer somewhere far from where the blood ran cold. But this one stayed. Left wrist, Omega Seamaster, silver band, black dial, domed crystal. Vintage, mid-60s, clean. No scratches, no smudges. Someone had taken care of it, wounded it, polished it, like it still mattered, even if the man wearing it no longer did. But the hands weren't moving. Frozen at 2:43 a.m., I checked the back casing. No chips, no dents. But it had been opened, maybe once, maybe recently. The screws didn't have the usual resistance. You don't notice that unless you've handled one before. Whoever opened it knew what they were doing. No forced entry, no damage. Just a pause button, pressed with surgical precision. I asked the ME to log the time. Later, she'd confirm what I already suspected. Time of death, 2:43 a.m., give or take a minute. She called it a coincidence. I didn't. There are two kinds of people who own watches like that: collectors and romantics. Collectors keep them boxed, insured, engraved with value. Romantics? They wear them. Let them age. Let the seconds tick away like heartbeats until one day they stop. But this was neither. This was staged, a final timestamp, like a lighthouse blinking through fog. Someone wanted that moment fixed, like it meant something, like it marked not just an end, but the point of no return. I ran my thumb over the bezel. It clicked faintly. The loom had long since faded, but the hands were still perfectly aligned. That takes effort. You don't set a dead man's watch unless you want someone to notice. And I did. The man in the tux wasn't just dressed for a farewell. He was counting down to 1. Someone had stopped his time and left it ticking in my hands. A breadcrumb. A whisper. Maybe even a warning. I bagged the watch carefully, not for evidence, for meaning. Time of death is a fact, but 2:43, that's a message. It said, "This is when I let go," or worse, "This is when you should have stopped me." I stared out at the water, the city still asleep behind me, and wondered who else had been watching the clock that night. Because if this man died at 2:43, someone else lived through it. And they didn't just walk away. They closed the watch and made sure it would never tick again. It was the sound of the ME swearing under her breath that pulled me back into the room. Not anger, surprise. She was holding the dead man's shoe like it had just whispered something. She motioned me over without saying a word and pointed to the sole. The heel had been tampered with. Nothing sloppy, just enough give that it didn't match the other. She worked it free with a scalpel, slow and steady. Inside, folded tight and dry as old parchment, was a small strip of leather-wrapped plastic. An ID card. The ink had faded, but the name was still clear. Conrad Vance. I didn't need to check the database. The name hit something deeper. I remembered it from a case file that never led anywhere. A jazz pianist. One of the good ones. Maybe not a household name, but respected in the kind of circles where late nights and slow burns mattered more than record sales. He had a style. Half lullaby, half heartbreak. Played like every key reminded him of someone he lost. He vanished in 1981, just gone. No note, no body, no debt. Played a show in Alphabet City, stepped off stage and disappeared like a curtain dropped over his life. Some said he fled a scandal. Others said he drowned in the river that used to listen to his music. None of it stuck. By 1989, the state stamped his name presumed deceased and moved on. Until now. I stared down at the body again, searching the face for something that matched the faded promo photos from the 70s. The hair was gone, the skin thinner, drawn, but the jawline was the same, the slight lean in the shoulders. Musicians don't lose that, not even in death. Conrad Vance had been dead for 40 years, just not officially. And now, here he was, dressed like he was headed to his own wake, time of death frozen on his wrist, and a piece of music in his pocket titled, "For the One Who Waited." I'd seen disappearances before, the kind that end in ransom or rage, but this wasn't that. This was a man who'd been waiting to reappear, and he'd chosen this moment to be found. Why? Why now, after decades? What brought him back to the surface? I had a name now, a ghost finally given back its face. But names are only the start. And with a man like Vance, the real answers don't come from the facts. They come from the silences between them. I bagged the ID, thanked the doc, walked out into the gray morning with the name echoing in my chest like the last note of a sad song. Conrad Vance. Found. Just not alive. The building was the kind you walk past 100 times without noticing. Brick faded to ash. Windows either too clean or too clouded, depending on which floor had someone still paying attention. The address on the ID led me here, a block off Avenue B, 5 stories high, no elevator. No cameras either. Just a buzzer that gave up years ago and a front door that opened when I knocked the right way. The super met me on the landing, man in his 70s, maybe older, with cataracts clouding both eyes and a Mets cap he probably hadn't taken off since the early 90s. Said his name was Manny. Said he didn't believe in coincidences. "You looking for Conrad?" he asked, like I'd shown up late to something everyone else already understood. "I am." He nodded once. "Told me someone had come eventually." "How long since you saw him last?" "Week ago, maybe 2. Hard to say. He came and went quiet. Always did." Manny unlocked the door without asking for a warrant. Said he owed Conrad a favor. Never said what it was. The apartment was a sealed room of memory. Air stale, light thin. Everything in its place like someone had arranged it with reverence and then decided not to disturb it again. The furniture was sparse, a chair by the window, a worn upright piano covered in a muslin cloth, and a small table stacked with sheet music that looked more like relics than tools. Dust covered everything, except the path between the door and the piano. Someone had been here recently, but not to live, to remember. The walls were lined with vinyl, Monk, Coltrane, Ellington, all alphabetized like a priest had done it. A turntable sat dormant in the corner, no speakers, just a pair of headphones, the foam rotted, hanging like question marks off their hooks. And then I saw it. On the mantel above the cold radiator sat a single envelope. Thick, yellowed. No stamp, no seal. Just one word written in tight, sharp handwriting. Mercy. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some things need to be read when the silence is ready to let go. Instead, I walked the room slowly, taking in the weight of a life paused. The piano hadn't been played in a while, but the keys were clean, polished, like someone had planned to return. Like they were waiting for the right hands. A note was tucked behind the strings, a melody, half finished, written in shorthand only musicians use. It didn't say much, just enough to feel unfinished. Like a story that knew how it ended but couldn't bear to write it down. Ghost notes. That's what jazz musicians call them. The sounds you don't hear but feel between the played ones. That's what this place was. A room of ghost notes. And somewhere in them was the reason Conrad Vance came back just in time to die. I pocketed the envelope. Whatever was inside, it wasn't addressed to me. But I was going to read it anyway. The neighbor lived across the hall. 3rd floor, apartment B. Door cracked open before I knocked. She was already watching me through the peephole, probably had been since I stepped on the first stair. Woman in her 60s maybe, hair in a tight twist, hands like they still remembered piano keys, even if they didn't play anymore. "You're here about Mr. Vance," she said. Not a question. I nodded. She opened the door wider, just enough to let her voice travel. "He die?" "Yes." She didn't flinch, just leaned against the door frame like she'd been expecting it. "Guess he finally kept a promise," she said. Meaning, she didn't answer, just stepped back and motioned toward her living room. She didn't ask for a badge, and I didn't offer one. Trust's a currency that spends differently in buildings like this. "He was a quiet man," she said, sitting down. "The kind who lived like a secret, never brought people in, never played loud, kept his windows closed even in summer. But every year, same day, same time, she came." "Who?" She looked at me like I should have known already. "The woman in white." "Tell me about her." "First time was 95, I think. Maybe earlier. Always the same. Early March, second Wednesday. Noon. She wore white, every time. White coat, white gloves, white shoes. Too clean for this building, too clean for this city." "She speak to you?" "Not once. Never even looked at me. Just walked up the stairs, left a bouquet of lilies at his door, then turned and walked away. Never knocked. Never lingered." "Did he ever open the door after she left?" "Not right away. Sometimes not for hours. Sometimes I think he waited until the petals started to brown, like he couldn't touch anything that fresh." "Same woman every time?" She nodded. "Didn't age like the rest of us. Tall, thin, pale, not ghostly, just out of place, like she didn't belong to this part of the world." "Sound like anyone you knew?" "No. And I know everyone on this block." "What do you think she was to him?" The neighbor looked at the blank TV screen like it might answer for her. "Regret, maybe, or forgiveness. Maybe both." I asked about cameras, but she shook her head. She wouldn't have shown up on one anyway, not someone like that. I thanked her. She didn't say goodbye, just closed the door behind me. Back in the hallway, I stared at the spot where the lilies used to be placed. Right at the center of the door, a ritual, a rhythm, something beyond guilt but not quite love. A single gesture, repeated like clockwork, like penance in petals. She never knocked. He never opened the door. That kind of silence means something. Whatever Conrad carried, she carried it too. And I had a feeling she was still out there, waiting for the next second Wednesday in March. Only this time, there'd be no one left to answer. The piano was older than me, upright, scratched, finish dulled by time and use. The kind of instrument that's been moved too many times, always with care but never without damage. Its keys were clean. Someone had wiped them recently, but the bench creaked like a sigh when I sat down. I lifted the lid and found nothing strange. Sheet music, pencils worn down to nubs, a tuning fork that hadn't been struck in years. But then I noticed the keyhole, right-hand side tucked beneath the keyboard. Small, brass, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Manny had mentioned a drawer once, said Conrad kept it locked. "Musician safe," he'd called it. Nothing valuable inside, just memories. He gave me the key, said Conrad would have wanted someone to know. It turned with a soft click. Inside, a cassette, no case, no label, just a single word written in red ink across the tape's shell. Crescendo. Below it, a photograph. Yellowed with age, edges curled. Conrad at the piano, younger. Black shirt, cigarette burning on the edge of a coffee saucer. The lighting looked accidental, but perfect, like it captured him mid-thought. There was someone beside him, a child, maybe 6, maybe 7. Standing just behind the bench, half out of frame. Their face was turned away, motion caught like they'd been about to speak, or run. No date, no name. But the photo was worn at the crease, like someone had unfolded it more than once, like someone had wanted to forget it and couldn't. I held the tape up to the light. No cracks, no dust. Someone had kept it safe, even if they never played it. I didn't push play. Not yet. That kind of sound needs space. You don't interrupt it with fluorescent lights and a notepad. You wait until the silence feels honest. But the title stayed with me. Crescendo. A musical term, sure, but not just louder. Rising, building, moving towards something final. Something that can't be undone once it's reached. Whatever was on this tape wasn't background noise. It was the climax of something Conrad had kept buried. Maybe for the child in the photo. Maybe for the woman in white. Maybe just for himself. I placed the tape in my coat pocket, folded the photo carefully, slid the drawer shut and locked it again out of habit. Some doors, even when opened, deserve to be closed with respect. Then I looked back at the piano. Still silent. Like it had played its last note years ago and had been waiting ever since for someone to understand what it meant. Not a song, a confession, pressed to tape, waiting for someone with the courage to listen. I waited until the precinct went quiet. Past midnight, no phones, no chatter, just the hum of the vending machine outside evidence and the low buzz of the overheads no one bothered to turn off. I sat in the interview room with the lights dimmed and the cassette player I'd borrowed from records on the table in front of me. It wheezed when I pressed play, like even the machine knew it was holding something that didn't want to be disturbed. The tape hissed. Then, music. Not polished, not studio clean. This was raw, alive in the way only tape can be. I could hear the soft creak of the piano bench, the brush of fingers warming up. Then came the melody. Slow. Not sad exactly, but full of something older than grief. Like longing turned into notes. Each chord measured, held just a second longer than it needed to be. The kind of timing that doesn't come from rehearsal, only regret. It wasn't for show. It wasn't for anyone. It was memory, played in keys. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. There was no flourish, no hook, just the weight of a man revisiting a moment he couldn't let go of. The refrain repeated, altered slightly each time, like he was trying to rewrite something that never ended the way it should have. And then, at the very end, when the final chord hung in the air just long enough to feel like it might never fall, I heard it. A breath. Shaky, pulled from somewhere deep. And a name. I'm sorry, Elise. Not loud, not dramatic, just whispered, like it wasn't meant to be recorded. Or maybe it was. Maybe he needed it preserved in sound because he'd never been brave enough to say it in person. I rewound it, listened again. I'm sorry, Elise. He wasn't confessing. He was remembering. Apologizing to a ghost he couldn't stop seeing. Elise wasn't a name in the tape log. Wasn't mentioned in his file. But she mattered. Enough to haunt the end of a piece he'd likely never intended anyone else to hear. I didn't take notes. Some things you don't dissect. You just let them sit. When it finished, I sat there for a long time with the tape spinning in reverse and the room colder than when I'd walked in. The music didn't explain the tuxedo. It didn't tell me why he died at the edge of the East River, frozen at 2:43 a.m. But it told me something else. It told me the wound wasn't physical. It was old, deep, still open, and named Elise. Elise Vance. The name sat in my notebook like it had been waiting there all along, half faded between phone numbers and parking violations. I started with city birth records, scanned every Vance in the 5 boroughs, and narrowed it down fast. One hit, Elise Margot Vance, born 1950, died 1980. Cause, suicide. No follow-up, no investigation, just a blunt end to a line that didn't want to be read. She died in a walk-up in Astoria, a 1-bedroom registered under her brother's name, Conrad. That told me everything, and nothing. I pulled the census data from '75. Elise was listed as head of household, occupation, music teacher, and beneath her name, one dependent, male, age 4, no name given, just a numerical tag for the system. A son. She had a son. Born 1971. No father listed on any of the documents, no marriage certificate, no adoption trail. Just an entry in an old census log and a child's age locked in time. There were no school records, no doctor's notes, no trace of where the boy went after she died. I checked the city's guardianship archive next, where wards of the state go when the family disappears or the system forgets them. A couple dead ends. Then I found it. A redacted folder, barely legible under layers of copied ink. Vance, EM child placed in state custody. No next of kin, no claim. Conrad didn't take him. That hit harder than I expected. He buried a sister and left the boy behind. Or maybe he didn't have a choice. Maybe grief numbed him too much to act. Maybe he thought he'd go back for the kid and just never did. Or maybe he thought it would be better that way. Because if Elise jumped or was pushed, the weight of that might have been too much for him to bring with him. I dug deeper, looked for social workers assigned to the case. Most were retired or dead. One had left notes in the margin. Child doesn't speak. No known relatives. Withdrawn. Won't respond to name. I didn't need the rest. I'd seen enough files like that to know what it meant. Whatever happened to Elise in 1980 didn't just kill her. It broke the silence she lived in and left a boy behind who carried all the sound she never got to scream. The system gave him a number, but that boy had a name once, and I was going to find it. Because someone played a song called Crescendo for Elise, and I had a feeling it wasn't just for her. It was for the son who never got to hear it. The church sat on the corner of 2nd and C, bricks blackened by weather and time, steeple leaning like even it was tired of praying. I'd followed a trail there, old playbills, whispers in the jazz scene, a photo in a community paper from 1978. Conrad at the piano during midnight mass, fingers on the keys, eyes closed. Like music was the only god left that hadn't betrayed him. The place hadn't changed much, still smelled of candle wax and dust that never settled. Inside, the nave was empty, pews scarred by decades of grief. A soft hum echoed from the back, not electrical, human. Humming. Low, slow, familiar. The priest met me in the sanctuary, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Name was Father Delaney. Said he remembered Conrad. Used to play like he was begging the keys for forgiveness, he told me. Never asked for money, just time. I told him I was looking into Conrad's death. The priest didn't look surprised, just nodded once and said, "He left something. I never opened it." He led me down into the basement, past stacked hymnals and forgotten folding chairs, to a drawer labeled Private Correspondence. From the back, he pulled a plain manila envelope. Sealed, no postage. On the front, in that same careful script I'd seen on the cassette. For my son, when he's old enough to ask what happened. My hand went cold when I took it, not out of fear, out of weight. That kind of letter doesn't just carry ink, it carries failure. He never came, the priest said quietly. The boy. We left it here in case he ever showed. Did he know where to look? He would have, if anyone had told him who he was. I stared at the envelope for a long time. The seal was still intact. No tampering, no signs of dust, just patience. 40 years of it, waiting for someone who never got the chance to ask. I asked Delaney if he ever read the name of the boy. He didn't leave one, he said. Just the letter, just the hope. I didn't open it right then. I couldn't, not in that basement, not in front of a man who'd already carried someone else's sorrow for too long. I thanked him. He nodded, like he knew I wasn't just there on official business. Back in my car, I sat with the letter on my lap. It was heavier than it looked, as if the paper had soaked up every year it waited. Conrad hadn't run, not really. He'd stayed close. Left breadcrumbs, tape, music, mercy, and now this. A letter to a son who never came, because no one told him he existed. I didn't know the boy's name yet, but I knew one thing. This story wasn't just about the dead. It was about the ones who were never told what they lost. Jack Alton. The name came up in an old article, buried in the back of a forgotten jazz zine from 1976. A photo of him and Conrad seated at a piano, sharing a cigarette between takes, both grinning like men who hadn't yet made the mistake they'd spend the rest of their lives trying to outrun. They were a duo once, played under the name East River Pact. Conrad on piano, Jack on upright bass. Two borough kids with fire in their hands and sorrow tucked behind every chord. Played Harlem bars and backroom clubs. Word was they never wrote anything down, just played it, one perfect aching set at a time. And then, just like Conrad, Jack vanished. Only difference, no obituary, no declared death, no silence filled with lilies and ghost notes. Jack just stopped existing. I tracked down an old friend of theirs, now working as a night janitor at a rehearsal studio off 14th. He didn't look surprised when I said Conrad was dead. Just stared at the floor for a long moment before saying, "Guess he went first." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They had a deal," he said. "Conrad and Jack. Made it after Elise died. After everything went sideways." "What kind of deal?" "If the truth ever came out," he said, "they'd both vanish. Not run, not hide, just disappear." "Disappear how?" He shrugged. "Didn't ask, didn't want to know. But I know Jack meant it, and I know Conrad did too." But only one body's shown up, I said. Yeah, the man said, which means either Jack broke the pact. He looked up at me, eyes sharper than they had any right to be, or the truth hasn't come out yet. It chilled me in a way nothing else had, because if Jack was still out there, still breathing, it meant one of two things. Either he was watching from somewhere, waiting for the last piece to fall into place, or he was making sure it never did. I pulled up every trace I could find on Jack Alton. No social, no arrest records, no address past 1982. Just one grainy photo from a reunion concert that never happened and a single canceled paycheck from a bar in Red Hook. There was no death certificate, no body, no sightings, just air. That kind of silence doesn't come easy. It's the kind you build brick by brick when you've got something worth burying. And if Conrad kept playing, for Elise, for the boy, for some kind of redemption, maybe Jack kept running. Or maybe he stopped long ago, and someone just hasn't found his piano yet. I didn't know where Jack was. But if the pact still meant something, he knew I was looking, and he knew why. The Lincoln Center archive doesn't smell like a library. It smells like preservation. Paper sealed in temperature-controlled drawers, soundproof rooms lined with old reel-to-reels and sheet music arranged like relics. You don't visit unless you're looking for something that refuses to die. I gave them Elise's name. The archivist paused when she heard it. Early 60s, silver bob, eyes like sharpened glass. Elise Vance, she repeated almost reverently. She played cello, left-hand dominant. Her bowing was strange, a little wild, but the sound, she closed her eyes for a second. It stayed with you. She studied here? Juilliard, she confirmed. Early admission in '68. Left suddenly, no recital, no farewell, just gone. I asked if there was a file. She led me back into a private room behind the microfiche stacks and produced a thin manila folder marked Vance, EM inside, transcripts, a student ID photo, and a short disciplinary notice. Handwritten, faded. Withdrawn, November 1970. Student removed following undisclosed incident. No formal charges filed. NYPD consulted. Documentation sealed by request of legal counsel. There it was, the shape of something too dangerous to write down. I asked the archivist if she remembered what happened. She hesitated, looked like she was about to lie, then decided it wasn't worth the effort. There were rumors, she said. Elise accused someone, another student, older, or maybe a faculty member. Hard to say, but it was serious. She came in one day shaken, played like her hands were on fire, then stopped showing up. Was Conrad involved? Not directly, but he came here once, late one night, banged on the practice room door, said something about protecting her, about taking her home. Did anyone listen? She gave me a look that told me everything I needed to know. Not in 1970. The photo in the file showed Elise at 19, hair swept back, chin lifted, eyes set on something behind the camera, maybe a note no one else could hear. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. She played the cello, and somewhere between the strings and the silence, someone crossed a line. It didn't go public. No article, no scandal, just a quiet erasure. That's how it was back then. When the wrong person speaks, you don't punish them, you make them vanish. From the program, from the records, from memory. But Conrad remembered. The tape said as much. I'm sorry, Elise. And now I had another reason why. He didn't just lose a sister. He lost her to a lie big enough the whole city agreed to keep it quiet. I slipped the photo into my coat. She played the cello, and then she stopped. And whatever happened between the final bow stroke and that last silent walk out the door, it was enough to burn a life down. The microfilm machine in the basement of the public library hissed like an old man clearing his throat. Each reel clicked through decades of paper, one whisper-thin page at a time. I wasn't looking for Elise's name in headlines. It wasn't that kind of scandal. If it had been, I'd have found it already. No, I was hunting in the margins, local columns, campus blotters, back pages where editors bury stories they're too scared to kill outright. It took 3 hours and the better part of my patience, but I found it. October 31st, 1970. Juilliard student cites inappropriate conduct by faculty member. No charges filed. No names. No direct quotes. Just vague language, soft denial, and a single line that burned like acid. According to a campus representative, the accusation has been deemed unfounded. The student in question has withdrawn voluntarily. Buried 3 paragraphs down, a mention of Mr. Vance, brother to the complainant, who caused a disturbance during a faculty meeting. That was it. No follow-up. No outrage. Just silence, wrapped in language designed to disappear. But I knew what I was looking at. I'd seen it before. The machine behind the curtain, a man with enough power to bend the story until it stopped looking like one. I searched for Elise's name again. After that date, it was gone. But something else showed up in the music section. Where is Conrad Vance? February 1971. A jazz critics column, half admiration, half concern. Following a blistering set at the Mercury Room in September, pianist Conrad Vance has vanished from the rotation. No new performances, no studio dates, no comment. And then another, 6 months later. Conrad Vance, once called the poet of the East River, hasn't played a note in nearly a year. Friends say he's in mourning. No obituary has been posted. I sat back in the chair, watched the reel spin to its end. Conrad didn't stop playing because he lost inspiration. He stopped because something broke, something Elise tried to name, something the city made sure no one heard. She spoke. And they erased her. And Conrad? He went quiet. Didn't perform, didn't write, just drifted, like music had become complicit in what happened to her. I looked again at the line about the faculty member. No name but the wording. Well-respected, long-serving, pillar of the conservatory, was its own kind of fingerprint. He'd never be accused twice. Not on paper, not officially, but someone knew. Someone in the city remembered. And someone made sure it never made noise. I stood, heart heavy, head louder, because the more I learned about Elise's silence, the more I started to hear it. It wasn't empty. It was full of everything no one let her say. I went back to city records, this time with a sharper knife. Elise's son, the boy the system tried to forget, was listed only as a case number in the guardianship log, V11783. No name, no birth certificate on file, no photo, just movement. First placement in 1980, 3 months after Elise's death. Temporary foster care, then another home, and another. 6 total by the time he turned 15. Notes scribbled by overworked caseworkers. Withdrawn, disassociated, doesn't speak much, trouble making eye contact. No known relatives, no visits, no inquiries. Not even from Conrad. That part stung more than I wanted to admit. He'd written a letter for the boy, left it in a church basement, said he wanted to explain when the kid was old enough to ask, but he never found him, never looked hard enough. Or maybe he didn't think he had the right. Either way, the boy went unclaimed. And then, like clockwork, the trail ended. Age 16, group home in Washington Heights, walked out one day and never came back. No incident report, no official missing persons file. Just a sentence in the case log, aged out, no further documentation. Except there was something. In the corner of one record, someone had typed an alias. Julian March. No birth date, no ID number, just a note. Possible self-identification. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the choice. He'd renamed himself. Julian March. A new name, a new beginning. Or maybe just a line in the sand between what he'd been and what he couldn't bear to keep being. I ran it through DMV, public court records, even the musician's registry. Nothing. Too clean. Either he was careful, or he was dead. But someone with that name had signed a lease in Red Hook 2 years ago. No social security number attached, just cash deposits and a reference from a local jazz club. That caught my attention. Because people don't vanish that completely unless they want to, or unless they're hiding from something worse than the past. I sat there with the folder open across my lap, the name Julian March circled in red, and felt the weight of an entire childhood pulled through the teeth of the city's indifference. A boy left behind by a broken mother, forgotten by a grieving uncle, raised by strangers, systems, silence. He didn't ask for any of it, but somehow he'd survived it. And if he was still alive, then maybe, just maybe, He'd been waiting to be found, not by family, but by the truth. The name came up in a midnight rabbit hole, a forgotten jazz blog run by someone who reviewed late sets and cheap bourbon. One post from last year, buried between write-ups on fading saxophone acts and old venues made new again, mentioned a place in Red Hook, the March Room, owned by a man named Julian March. No photos, no bio, not even a quote. But one line stood out. "The house pianist plays like a man chasing ghosts." That was all I needed. Red Hook's not a part of the city that gives you anything for free. Streets curve like secrets. Old warehouses turned into art spaces no one can afford. The kind of place where people come to disappear with just enough class to make it feel like a choice. The club was easy to miss. No neon sign, just a black awning with gold stitching and a small plaque by the door. The March Room, Wednesday through Sunday. Sets at 9 and midnight. Cash preferred. Online reviews were sparse, purposefully so. Inside, it was all velvet and wood. Low light, soft murmurs, the clink of old glasses on older tables. The kind of club where time didn't follow you in. I stayed near the back. Didn't flash a badge, just watched. Waited. At 9:07, he walked on stage. No announcement, no name, just sat down and started to play. It was him. Had to be. Not because he looked like Elise. He didn't. His face was harder, eyes darker. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from shyness, but from long years of not trusting what silence will do to you. But his hands told the truth. They didn't just play the keys, they searched them. Like every note was a question no one had ever answered. The music wasn't polished. It wasn't meant to be. It stumbled once or twice. On purpose, I think. Like the mistakes were part of the message. There was a restlessness in it, something chasing its own tail, refusing to resolve. Like the song didn't want to end because endings meant loss. I listened through the whole set. 40 minutes of memory, none of it spoken. When he stood to leave, he didn't bow, just walked off stage like he'd forgotten he was ever there. I didn't follow him that night, not yet, because the music told me something the records never did. Julian March wasn't hiding from his past, he was playing it, one broken chord at a time, and now that I'd heard it, really heard it, I knew. He didn't need to be found. He'd been here the whole time, waiting for someone who could finally name the ghost he was chasing. The club's owner wasn't Julian, at least not on paper. The lease listed a holding company out of Jersey, the kind people use when they'd rather not sign their names in ink. But I knew better. Julian was the heart of the place, and ghosts don't need legal titles. The bartender was easier to talk to than I expected. Said his name was Nolan, early 40s, tired eyes. The kind of man who's seen enough broken geniuses to stop asking questions. I showed him Conrad's photo. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded. 2 weeks ago, he said. Tuesday night, early. Place was still setting up. Did he talk to anyone? No, just sat near the stage. Didn't order, didn't drink, just watched. Was Julian here? He was. Did they speak? Nolan shook his head. Not a word. I asked if he was sure. He leaned in a little. I watched it happen, or didn't, I guess. Julian came out of the back, saw the man sitting there, froze, stared for a long time. You could feel it, something passed between them. Not anger, not warmth, something else. What'd Julian do? Sat down at the piano, played one song, just one, something slow, barely touched the keys, like he didn't want to scare it. And then? He left, didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. And Conrad? Sat there for another 20 minutes, then stood up, put something on the stage, a folded piece of paper, walked out. Nolan said the note disappeared before he could check what it said. I asked for the security footage. He hesitated, then handed me a flash drive. Don't expect much, he said. Some moments don't show up right, even on film. He wasn't wrong. Back at the precinct, I watched the footage. Tuesday night, 7:48 p.m. Conrad walks in, tuxedo, hands in his pockets. He scans the room, sees the piano, and sits stage left. Julian appears 12 minutes later, coming from the back hallway. Sees Conrad. Freezes. Doesn't flinch, doesn't bolt. Just looks. They hold that stare for almost a full minute. No words, no gestures, just two men, 20 feet apart, surrounded by everything they hadn't said. Then Julian sits. He plays. One song. No sheet music, no showmanship. Just a few fragile notes, barely louder than the noise of the room. When he finishes, he stands and walks away. Conrad stays. He reaches into his coat, places a folded page on the piano, and walks out the door. 2:43 a.m. 2 weeks later, he's found dead by the river. I paused the video, stared at the freeze frame. Two men divided by decades in silence. The reunion happened, just not the way it should have. No embrace, no apology, just music, and all the pain that came with it. It showed up in a plain envelope, no return address, no postage. Just the word detective scrawled across the front in a hand that didn't want to be recognized. The desk sergeant found it in the precinct drop box, sitting between a stack of unpaid parking fines and a half-eaten donut someone left behind out of guilt or distraction. Inside, a cassette. Old Maxell tape, red label, blank spine, and a note. He left it at my door. I think it was for you as much as it was for me. Signed, Julian. I took it back to the interview room. Same player, same silence. I clicked it in. Pressed play. The piano came first, familiar now. The same song from the first tape. But this time it wasn't tape hiss and memory. It was cleaner, slower. Played on a different piano, maybe. You could hear the difference. The sustain, the weight of every note. But something was layered beneath the music this time. Something small, shaky, a breath. Then, you deserved the truth, but I wasn't strong enough to tell you. It was Conrad. The voice had the same tremble, the same ache. I thought silence would protect you, that if I kept it buried it couldn't hurt you. But silence isn't safety. It's just another kind of lie. The piano kept playing like it didn't care what the words cost him. I failed her. Elise. I told her I'd take her away. I told her I'd protect her from him, but I let fear decide who I was. The voice cracked. You were only a boy. You didn't know. And by the time I realized what they'd done to her, what they'd taken, it was too late. She was gone, and I didn't fight hard enough for you. The tape skipped slightly. I leaned closer. I wrote you a letter, left it in a church. Thought maybe someday you'd come asking, but the city swallowed you like it swallows everything we're not brave enough to name. A pause. Just music now. Then, softer. I saw you. At the club. You looked like her. Not her face, not her voice, but the way you held the keys, like they hurt. Like they knew. The final chord rang out, sustained, then silence. No goodbye. No name. Just the sound of a man who waited too long to say what needed saying. I rewound it. Listened again. Every word was drenched in regret. But it wasn't performative. It wasn't for redemption. It was for recognition. A quiet man trying to give his nephew back a piece of history the city erased. I sat there, the tape turning back to the beginning, and realized something else. Julian had listened, and then he'd handed it over, which meant he was done hiding and ready, finally, for the truth to speak back. The coroner's report was buried deep, wrong decade, misfiled, maybe on purpose. Suicide, it said. Single sentence beneath the cause of death. Fall from height. No signs of struggle. Declared non-suspicious. Dated December 2nd, 1980. No mention of a rooftop. No mention of the church. But the address listed matched. St. Augustine's on 2nd and C. The same place where Conrad left his letter a year later. It didn't click at first. Just another line in a folder full of them. But something about it scratched at me. That church wasn't near Elise's apartment. It wasn't near anything. If she jumped, she didn't do it in passing. She went there. Chose it. Or thought she did. I pulled the records for that week, checked everything from 911 logs to maintenance reports. Then I found it. An unsigned letter, dated January 7th, 1981, filed with the precinct. No follow-up, no response. Just a note, scrawled in block letters. She didn't jump. He pushed her. I saw it happen. The church, the roof. It had been scanned, stamped, then shelved. No signature, no case opened, no one called back. Just another anonymous whisper in a city that's deaf by design. But someone had seen it, and someone had tried to speak. I went back to the church the next morning. Found Father Delaney in the courtyard, sweeping away a snowfall that didn't stick. I asked him about the roof. He didn't deny it. "Used to be a maintenance ladder in the sacristy," he said. "Fire code violation. We sealed it years ago. Back then it was open. Could anyone have accessed it? If they knew the church, if they had a reason." Elise did. He looked down at his hands, old, veined, red from the cold. "She came here once, the night before, asked if she could pray. I let her sit alone, didn't think anything of it." "Did you see her after?" "No. Did you ever read the report?" He shook his head. "Someone said she was pushed," I told him. That stopped him. He didn't ask who, didn't ask why, just whispered, "God forgive us." I climbed to the roof myself, new ladder, city approved, but the bones were the same. The ledge was waist high, old stone, eroded just enough that if someone wanted to stage a suicide, it wouldn't take much. And if someone had followed her, if someone with power had made sure the truth died with her, it would have looked like just another lost girl in a city full of them. But Conrad knew. He didn't say it on the tape, didn't need to. It was in the pauses, in the letter, in the silence that filled every space her name was missing. He knew she didn't jump, and I was starting to think he knew who pushed her. The only question left was whether Julian did too. I waited longer than I should have to open it. The envelope marked Mercy sat in my desk drawer for 3 days, tucked beside a folder I didn't have the heart to close and a cassette I couldn't bring myself to play again. Something about it felt sacred, like opening it would undo the last layer of silence keeping the past from drowning me too. But when the call came, Julian asking if there was more, I knew it was time. The paper inside was thin, delicate, the kind that folds too easily, like it knows it's been hiding something. Conrad's handwriting hadn't changed, sharp, measured, every line written like he expected it to be read by someone who didn't want to. "Julian, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if anyone will. But if you do, don't call this forgiveness. Don't call it closure. It's not. It's just the last thing I have to say." I read the rest in silence. That night, Elise called me. Said she was scared. Said he'd followed her again. I told her I was coming. I told her to go to the church, to wait there, that I'd find her. And I did. But I was too late. I saw him. He was already on the roof, already yelling. She was crying. I heard her say no. I heard her say my name. And I didn't move. I don't know why. Maybe I thought he'd back down. Maybe I thought it wasn't real yet, that it couldn't be. But I didn't run. I didn't shout. I didn't stop it. I just watched. Watched her fall. The sound she made when she hit the pavement still wakes me up sometimes. Not because it was loud, but because it was final. And I deserved to hear it. There was no defense in the letter. No shifting blame. Just wait. I told the police it was suicide. I told everyone, because I was a coward. Because I thought if I said it enough, it would become true. I even convinced myself for a while. But you were just a child, and I let you grow up thinking she broke. Thinking you came from something weak. I stole the truth from you and replaced it with silence. At the bottom of the letter, one final line. Mercy isn't silence. It's telling the truth, even when it comes too late. There was no signature, just space. I folded the letter back into the envelope. He hadn't killed anyone, not with his hands. But guilt isn't about what you do, it's about what you let happen while you stand still. And Conrad Vance had stood still at the worst possible moment. He let Elise fall, then spent the rest of his life trying to write the sound of it out of his head. And now, the letter wasn't his anymore. It was Julian's, because the truth had finally crawled out of the silence, and it had his name on it. The wind off the East River always feels colder when you're not carrying anything but memory. I sat on the bench, same one where they found him. Conrad Vance, dressed like an apology, laid out like he wanted the city to look him in the eye before it turned away again. The plaque had been bolted in last week. Polished brass, simple font. To the ones who waited. No name, no date, just that. It said more than a headstone ever could. I sat there with both tapes in my coat pocket, heavy like loaded shells. One with music, one with a voice, and between them, 40 years of a man trying to unbury a single moment he never outran. There's no one left to arrest. The man who pushed Elise disappeared into the cracks like men with power always do. The report was buried, the name never written. And Conrad, he carried that silence like a punishment, all the way to the edge of the city, and then laid it down like a final composition. Julian didn't ask for vengeance. He asked for truth. And when I gave him the letter, the tape, the story, he didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just nodded. Like something inside him had stopped pacing. He told me he'd keep playing. Not for Conrad, not for Elise, but for himself. I stayed long after the sun dropped behind the skyline. Watched the shadows of the bridge stretch across the water like long fingers trying to hold something that couldn't be held anymore. The city moved behind me, indifferent. Horns, sirens, laughter that never reached this far east. Conrad didn't die anonymous. He died confessing. Maybe not in court, maybe not in time. But he said her name. He said the truth. And in this city, that counts for more than most people ever get. There won't be a case file with closure stamped on the last page. No press release, no trial. Just a quiet story no one asked to hear, finally finding its way into the air. Not as justice, not as retribution, but as acknowledgement. Some wounds don't get bandaged, they get named. And naming them is the only way they stop owning you. The river doesn't answer, doesn't ask. It just moves. Cold and constant, like time, like guilt. Like love you never said out loud. I stood up, left the tapes on the bench. Someone else would find them. Maybe someone who needed to. And as I walked back into the city that eats everything but its own history, I realized something. You can't save the dead. But sometimes, if you listen close enough, you can help them speak one last time.